So we are going to elaborate on our gradient painting that we did with the sphere value study. Got a little bit more complex subject matter here. This is our reference photo. I've already done this line drawing, kind of a quick line drawing of it. I want you to use the brush Oil Heavy Flow Dry Edges. You may have to go, if that brush isn't there, you may have to go up here, and in the newer version of Photoshop, which you will have, it will have legacy brushes here. I think this is part of the legacy brushes, and you'll have to click that. It'll ask if you want to turn on restore legacy brushes or something like that. You'll say yes. It'll load this new set of legacy brushes. And there's even subcategories under that, and I forget which one it is. It may be general brushes or something underneath legacy brushes. I think it's like the first subcategory underneath the legacy brushes. Again, my version of Photoshop here is a little bit older, so it does not have that setting. You may have to go look for that. But I want you to use that brush. I just think it has a nice brush look. Make sure you use a color that's not too contrasting. We want to be able to see it. We're just basically going to be using this as our our guide for where we're going to be putting our gradient painting. To set it up here, notice I have a background layer, white, just white background. There's a layer where I put the sketch, and then a paint layer. We may need to end up adding some more paint layers later, but for now we'll just start here. So do a quick sketch of this. I don't want you to trace it, so that's why we have these separate here. So you can look at it, but not directly trace it. You may have to turn off application frame to get your two windows to separate here. If your application frame is on, everything is locked into this big rectangle, and it's at least I don't know of a way to get them to show two images at once. So make sure your application frame is turned off, unchecked. To save time, I just did the sketch ahead of time. We're going to be making sure we're on the paint layer. We got to get our gradient. Remember, we're going to be using the polygonal lasso tool, but we got to get our gradient tool kind of set up here. This is a preview of what it is. It's color. Let me get a darker color here so we can see. So right now it's whatever your foreground color is. That's what is going to be on one side of the gradient. Right now it's set to where it goes from black, the foreground color, to white. We want to choose this one here. You can see this goes from black to transparent, and that's what we want. We also want to make sure that we are on linear gradient, not this radial gradient or whatever these things are here. Opacity, we're going to make that really low, something like 33, and make sure transparency is clicked on here. And getting the polygonal lasso tool, we're going to trace around this whole thing. Okay, got the whole thing selected. You always have to pay attention when you're using these selection tools. Keep in mind what is selected and what's not. Right now, because we went around this shape and closed it in, the inside of this is the active selection. This out here is not selected. If we took our brush and just went across it, you can see it's only going to paint where the selection is. I'm going to undo that. A handy little thing here that I want to show you is how to save a selection. So we go to Select, Save Selection. This will just help as you need to select this, this being the main figure on the thing. We're probably going to have to select it multiple times. So we can save the selection so we don't have to manually do it every time. We've done it once, we can save the selection here. And just call it, figure or something, whatever you want to call it there. Or so you can make it selection 1, selection A. And all this should just look like this. Say OK. And actually I'm going to deselect, Command D, because I want to start by actually giving this thing a little bit of a general light to dark. I'm gonna, this thing has kind of this brown. It's a warm kind of feel to the image, right? So I'm gonna go somewhere in here, something kind of dark. You don't want it too intense. Remember, intensity of color is this side. So dark, I don't know, something like that. And I'm going to make sure I'm on the paint layer and just kind of look at the image. Where is it dark in general? What is dark? What is light? It's dark at the top edge. It gets lighter towards this bottom edge, just in general, right? So I'm just going to quickly throw some of that in. We don't want to go too dark. We're not trying to go as dark as it is right here, right now. This is just kind of giving some atmosphere to it, and I want to even add a little bit more color. That's why that really low opacity is nice, just to give it a little more tone to it, so it doesn't look too gray. Okay, so I did that. That's fine for now. It's going to give this whole thing a little bit of an atmosphere. It's going to, by putting this little under gradient under everything, it's going to help the figure feel like it's in the same environment with the background. Now, because we saved that selection, I'm going to go here, go to Select, Load Selection, because I want to get back my selection of the entire figure now. And you have to drop this down and go to Figure. I don't know why there's two of them, but it always works. This pops this selection that we made earlier back up, the one that we saved. Now we could go a little bit darker here. Or what I need to do first is, right now the figure is selected, right? I'm gonna build up the background a little bit more. So right now the figure is selected. I want to make it to where this area is selected. That's what's also nice about selecting this entire figure. We can go to Select, Inverse, and notice it flips it to, so now this area out here, if I get my brush, the background area, the negative area is what is selected now. And get the gradient and just throw in some more dark up there. It's kind of like you're revealing the figure by painting everything that's not the figure. Something like this. I'm adding a little bit, just to give it a little bit of this warm tone down here. I'm going to get some warmth and bring it kind of all the way down. One thing that's a very big part of this image is going to be the back table edge there. I want to go ahead and put that in. There's an easy way to get that selection. Or really, basically what I want to do is not paint that table. So I'm going to deselect this part. Remember, if we get our polygonal lasso tool, if we hold Option, notice we get the little minus sign next to the lasso there, and I'm going to select or I guess technically deselect. Remember, you can hold Command to automatically click and close it there. So that's close. I want to fix it though, because I want it to be a little truer to this. I want that tabletop to be a little bit closer. Notice it's a little bit closer up to the armpit area there. So I'm just going to Command Z, undo that. Go back here again, hold Option, click. You have to click outside of your selection since we are subtracting this part. Hold Command, click, and it closes it. Notice now it's taken away that part down there. Only part that is selected is up here. Go back to the gradient tool, which is G, shortcut G. That I still had some light color there, so I'm gonna go grab a little bit darker, a little less saturated too. And I didn't. I'm gonna go back again. Go back to my selection because I want to get this corner of the table here. Notice how you can make mistakes and then oops, undo. I didn't hold Option. Make sure you hold Option before you click, otherwise it's going to think you're trying to make a new selection. I'm going to do something like this. Okay, now back to my gradient tool. And really just make that pretty dark back there. Okay, notice we're not building it up to where it's 100% solid. That's a big part of this gradient painting, is not building anything up to where it's 100% opaque. We want it to have this light feel, this kind of space and depth. So for now, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to load the selection again because I want it back to the main figure. So figure, load that selection. And here, just kind of in general, like we did with the overall image, what is the general value structure of this thing? It's dark on this left side. It's light on this side. So I'm just going to pull some dark that way. We don't want to do too much. Be careful you don't go too dark too fast. It's a little darker there. So that instantly I feel like went too dark. So I'm going to undo. I think I'm just going to kind of leave it at this for now and deselect. And now the fun part starts, where you're going through and really, I like this method of painting because it makes you really look for shadow shapes. I'm kind of big on finding those shadow shapes and highlight shapes, basically value shapes. Some of these you can kind of notice I drew them in with my line drawing. Some of them you can kind of draw in, some of the main ones. This is where some of your artistic decision making is gonna start to happen. How do I put that shape in there? Where does the shape start? Where does it end? I'm gonna go ahead and go all the way down here. Don't worry if you cover up some of the light. We can come back in and add light to places. That's a quick swipe there. I think I'm going to lower this opacity even a little bit more, like 25. Okay. And back at it again here. Just be loose with these shapes, but also be descriptive. I don't know if that makes sense, but so much of the form relies on how these shapes are put in there. You want to make sure you're wrapping around forms. And I think not getting too hung up on making them perfect right now. It's like the analogy I also use, you're kind of molding something out of clay. You don't do it in the first pass. You kind of get the general forms and refine as you go. Zoom in a little bit here. Let's see. Remember, if you make a bad shape, you can always fix it, undo, fix it. This shape seems really important and really dark, so I'm going to try to get that one. I don't like that thin part, but I'm going to see what happens. These things look very geometric or blocky, but you'll notice if you do enough of this selection, you'll start to be able to round these things off. That may not make sense right now, but watch as we kind of go through. Basically, like reselecting parts of it will help you smooth out some of these really sharp angles. It's a lot of selecting, so there's kind of no way around that. I'll build that up. That's pretty dark. Pretty dark little spot there. Maybe even hit it again. Your sketch is actually pretty important. Make sure you got, not every little detail, but enough that you can figure out where you are when you're looking at the image. Make sure you're looking for shadows within the shadows. You'll look and see a big general shadow. Like watch here on this big belly shadow. I'm going to do one there. Obviously it goes a little bit darker in this little triangle, but just doing one, and then how do we get that darker triangle? Come back. And this is kind of where I'm talking about being able to fix some of those harsh angles. Notice how I'm selecting back over that and kind of smoothing it over. There. Don't let it scare you though. You got to get in there and make some of these shapes to figure out where, where the next shapes go. As you do this more, you'll get a better hang of like how to make your selections and what selections are good selections and how to simplify your shapes. This is an area where, I think it goes a little darker here. So instead of dragging all the way across, I can kind of like drag shorter and it puts a little bit more dark right there. Oops, I just undid it. So notice how it makes a big difference. If I click and drag all the way across it, it pulls that shadow all the way across. Undo. If I just stop there, notice how it stops and it gives almost a little transition, little gradation there. Command D. I'm using that constantly. Command D to deselect. And holding Command at the end of those selections to get those things to close a lot of the times. Here's a really good spot where, getting these other shapes in here, getting that first shape instantly kind of told me where this smaller little shape needs to be. Don't be too picky at first. Again, go at it loosely. You can always fix it. But yeah, it's a lot of selecting, adding in your little values. Every once in a while, back up. See how you're doing. Don't get hung up in one spot too long. I think that's another thing to keep in mind. Kind of get everything rough first before you go back and really start trying to refine spots. There's a spot where I'm kind of breaking from my drawing a little bit, I think. I think this line should have been up higher, maybe just a touch. Constantly using L to select my lasso. G to get my gradient tool back. Constantly looking back and forth as I'm making these selections, looking back and forth between my lasso tool and the reference photo. Eyebrow there. I think that's weird, but I'm gonna, come back to it. The more little shapes you make, the more you keep at this, the more realistic it's going to look, even though I don't like to use the word realistic, but the more, just the better it's going to look, I'll say. There will be spots that you have to, I think zooming in will really help in certain areas, making some fine lines like in the eyes. Look how forms are made by the value next to it, and specifically the shape of the value next to it. And what I mean by that is like this little part here where it pops out, you know, this brow between the eyebrows, where this little rectangle-ish shape looks like it's coming out. Look how it's made. Look how we understand what this shape looks like because of this little shadow here. That little shape of that shadow. You cannot make that too straight, otherwise you're not going to describe. You know, if you make this too straight of a line here of value, you're not going to describe what's happening here. It's sinking in between. There's these bumps in between. Really look for those types of things. Again, that's why I think this is a great, if not, you know, a technique that you'll use all the time to paint. I'm going to redo that one. Great exercise in seeing those value shapes, both the light and the dark. That one was questionable. I don't think it, you know, I don't think it describes the form very well. Look how that one kind of sticks out. But I'm going to leave it there for now because I think we can fix it as we go along. You can see how it's going to come together. I'm going to add a little bit of this peachy yellowy orange color to it by loading the selection, because I just want to add it to the figure for now. Or I don't know, I don't know what that was, but I'm just going to add it to the whole thing actually. Something like that. And just, I'm going to start from the bottom here. There. Add some warmth to it. I think right now I could, just to show off the lights a little better, I'm going to darken in the background. So I'm going to load that figure selection. Say OK. And then inverse, select the inverse. And then I'm also going to, watch what I'm going to do here though. I'm going to, oops, not that. I'm going to kind of not select right back along that edge. Notice how we have a soft edge back there. And you can get those by not perfectly selecting the exact same edge that you made before. Get my gradient. I'm going to get a much darker color. Don't be afraid to click and drag multiple times. So notice how what that did to that back edge. We've got kind of this middle value in between the super light and the background dark. And just keep, you know, going back and forth, looking for shapes that you may have missed earlier. You can always modify a shape also by taking away from it or adding to it with your Shift or Option key. Let's see, some of these things can go just a touch darker right in the core of it. Notice I'm not worrying about lining things up perfectly every time. You're going to get some of this where your edges don't line up exactly. Look at this stuff up here. That's okay. Go with it. Upper part of this is just a touch darker. You'll get good enough at this where you, not going all the way to the edge here, you'll get good enough at this to where sometimes you can just kind of make these shapes up to even enhance the value structure, make it even better than the reference photo. Make this just a little bit darker, just kind of here's a spot I'm kind of make up this shape. Let's say adding some light. So on this very light side here, because you can also create a lot of middle values by adding light, right? And not going all the way to the edge of this. I think for this, I'm going to make a new layer. And make it highlights, or maybe not highlights yet, but just lights. You don't necessarily have to do that, but just in case. So I'm going to grab some. Remember that opacity is low, so you can do a pretty light color. Give it a little bit of color though, not just a pure white. Let it have some warmth, or if you're going even the opposite end of the spectrum and making cool lights, instantly looks better, I think. Look how, adding some light there suddenly starts to really round things out. I don't really know about that shape. I just kind of made that up. That's, that's that decision making. Like, where does that light stop up here? You kind of have to, you have to make that decision. Sometimes those things are the fun little decisions you get to make as an artist. Like, it's not exactly the way it looks in the photo or in the still life or the landscape, but that's the way I'm going to do it and see what happens. A lot of times that's where your personal style is going to come from those little troubling decisions that you have to make. Whoops, accidentally hit the gradient there. You see where this is going though. Honestly, this can take a long time. I don't know that I'm going to show you everything or, completely finish this out in one video. Because it's fun for me to do, but it's probably not that fun for you to just watch. Keep finding these shapes. If things get a little messy in terms of, like, I don't know the exact structure of the lip and all that right here just yet, but that's okay. This is that, so I need to add a little bit of, sometimes adding these little reflected lights that are coming up from the table make all the difference in the world. I don't even know what that shape is, but I'm putting it there. I may keep working on this and pick the video back up when I have a little bit more to show you how you can do some stuff with the brush. I think you can kind of see basically what's happening here. Look how good that face is looking just from adding the lights. Suddenly we have the middle value of the under painting that we did. We have the lights, and then we have the darks on the other side. Really starting to round things out. You can see I need to go back here and go back to my regular paint layer. There's this much darker shadow here. Kind of core shadow. And I'm going to get the gradient. If you hold down Option, just like with a normal brush, Option gives you your eyedropper. Select right from that dark in the background. Throw some of that in there. Okay, it's just going to keep getting better as you keep sinking those darks in. You know, we're going to get some tiny little darks in here. We may do it with the brush, we may do it with the selections, but the more of these little shapes you put on there, the better it's going to look. So I've been adding my value shapes up to this point. I think I could still do more, keep working at it, but kind of ready to show you maybe if you're ready to start using the brush to clean up a few things. Here's the way we can do that. So we get our brush. Remember, we're using the oil heavy flow dry edges, and you're not going to come in here and undo all of these nice shapes. Use it to clarify some things, add some highlights. You know, if you just really can't live with some of the jaggedness of the edges, we can come back in, pretty small brush here. I think this works especially well on places where we're going to have a hard edge, right? I think I need a little bit lighter color. Not too light though. See, I probably should have added some more light to some of these areas. You can also use the background color, select some from the background color to clean up some edges. Notice there's a little bit of a drawing issue here. I'm going to bring that down some. You don't really want to notice the brush strokes, so I mean you want the color to be close, value especially. Maybe you clean up some things like this. Maybe I'm going to turn maybe bring some of this dark across. Oh, let me see here. I do want to lower the opacity here. Let me go back. That could be part of the issue. Opacity down something like 88, maybe flow something like 66. So you can kind of build it up slowly. I use this really to kind of sink in some of the darks. I call this like sinking in the darks, where it's really pushing these tiny little crevices in there deeper. We can also use it for adding some of these bright highlights. I still wouldn't go with pure white. Go to white and then come back toward the color just a little bit, so you have a little bit of a tone in there. And throw in some of those those highlights really do stand out. It's a result of it being shiny and reflecting a bright light. Leave it kind of brushy looking though. Clean up this edge a touch. Really just kind of using the brush to give it some focus, some harder edges and spots. Not doing too much with it. Not covering up all the hard work I've already done. You can sometimes correct a little drawing mistakes. Bring some light into some spots that you wanted to. Especially areas like here where I definitely want that dark against dark. I do think I can make my shadow a little stronger. My cast shadow, I mean. See that sinking in those darks. While I'm playing with it, I want to go ahead and darken this shadow, like I said. I'm intentionally not going to go all the way to the edge here, so I can get kind of a what looks like a soft edge shadow. This is a really pretty dark cast shadow. Got to get that belly shine. I'm going to try to do this with like one good swipe of the brush here. Make it a little bit bigger and getting dangerous here. I think that's a bit much, but try to add some light with some gradient here. Not crazy about that, but I'll come back to it. It's one thing I'm realizing just looking at it, that I need to really punch up the light in some spots. So it's really this back and forth between the brush and the... Don't do too much with the brush. Let the gradient do kind of the heavy work here. And yes, like I said earlier, you're going to have to do lots of selections. It's part of this process. It makes you really good at the at making selections with the lasso tool. I mean, I think you could go on forever just refining this and refining it. See how everything's just getting softer the more shapes you add. Gotten to where I'm really kind of making up shapes as I go. I've become kind of comfortable with the form now, so I'm still, yes, looking at the reference, but doing a lot of this just intuitively as I feel things need. something that's been kind of bothering me is this looks more like a tongue sticking out, and I think it's because of how thin the dark is. So I'm going to add some more dark here. Like I said, we could go on with this forever. I'm going to, I think, end it here. Otherwise, yeah, we can make this a 3-day video. Just keep working on it. Keep going over and over those values. Keep finding ones that you missed the first time around. Keep refining the ones that you did put in. Sharpening up some edges with some with the brush. You can see how I added this. I kind of like it, or starting to like it. I think I could come back and add that light. You know, like we always do, keep comparing light. You know, how light is this compared to this and this and this? When I look at the reference, this area is about the same light as up here. It's about the same light as here. This goes a touch lighter. That's how we can find those values. Keep looking for them in other places. Yeah, and just do a bunch of selecting, bunch of gradient painting. Eventually you'll get there. Okay. Let me add this real quick. See, it's just going to keep getting better. More volumetric, more round as we go. Alright, that's that for now. I'm going to keep working on it.